Hey everyone, I'm your author June. Before we get started, I really would appreciate it if everyone could hit the subscribe button. It helps me grow the channel, and I would love for all of you to come on this journey with me, as a family. Now, let's get into the story. Let me know if you enjoy. The late afternoon sun, a brazen eye in the vast Wyoming sky, beat down on Harmony Gulch, turning the main street into a shimmering river of dust. Ethan leaned against the rough-hewn post outside the general store, the familiar scent of leather and dry goods mingling with the oppressive heat. His gaze drifted to the sheriff's office across the way, a sturdy, unassuming building that represented more than just law and order. It represented Cole Grady, the man who had pulled Ethan from the wreckage of a collapsed mine shaft years ago, a day that had irrevocably carved a new beginning into his very soul. That rescue had forged a bond stronger than blood, a silent, binding vow of loyalty that Ethan had never questioned. Part of that oath, unspoken but deeply understood, was an immutable rule. He would never, under any circumstances, allow himself to fall for Charlotte Grady, Cole's spirited, fiercely independent little sister. Yet, the Charlotte he now knew was far from the gangly, braided girl who'd once timidly offered him a piece of stale gingerbread after his rescue. The years had sculpted her into a woman of formidable grace and sharp intellect, her hands calloused from reins and rope, her eyes the color of a summer sky, clear and unyielding. She moved with an unyielding grace, her spirit as untamed as the wild mustangs that roamed the surrounding mesas, and her voice, despite its gentle timbre, possessed a quiet strength that could still any storm. She was a rancher, through and through, capable and commanding, a force of nature rooted in the very land she worked. When her family's sprawling property, the Grady Ranch, began to suffer under a series of calculated, shadowy attacks, cut fences, spooked cattle, then outright rustling, Ethan had stepped in without a moment's hesitation. It was a matter of duty, a debt repaid, a promise kept to the man who had given him a second chance at life. He rode the perimeters, mended fences, and stood silent vigil, a shadow among the shadows, protecting what was Cole's. But as days bled into weeks, and shared dangers sparked unexpected moments of intimacy, that stoic duty began to unravel, twisting into something deeper, something profoundly dangerous and undeniably personal. What began as a mere obligation shifted, subtly at first, then with an overwhelming force, into an undeniable attraction, a searing awareness of Charlotte that consumed his thoughts and set his blood alight. The unspoken line he had drawn in the sand, the boundary he swore he'd never cross, blurred, then shimmered, and then, inexorably, vanished entirely. The stakes were higher than ever, far beyond the acreage of the Grady Ranch. If Cole, the only true family Ethan had ever known, the brother of his heart, ever discovered the illicit yearning, the burgeoning affection that now pulsed between Ethan and Charlotte, he would lose everything. The quiet trust, the easy camaraderie, the very foundation of his fragile, rebuilt life in Harmony Gulch would crumble to dust. The thought of severing that profound, life-giving bond, of betraying the man who had pulled him from darkness, was a terror that gnawed at him, even as Charlotte's presence, her laughter, her quiet strength, her burgeoning vulnerability became as essential to his existence as the very air he breathed. The dusty main street, the familiar clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the distant lowing of cattle, all of it felt charged with a new, terrifying potential, a future hanging precariously on a secret he might not be able to keep. The sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows, mirroring the lengthening shadow of his unspoken desire. The dust in the shadow, the sun dipped lower, painting the western sky in hues of orange and bruised purple, as Ethan rode out from Harmony Gulch, leaving the faint clatter of the town behind. His destination was the Grady Ranch, a sprawling expanse of land nestled against the foothills, a place that had, over the years, become a second home, a sanctuary. Yet, even this sanctuary was now under a veiled, insidious threat. The scent of dust and distant sage filled the air, a familiar comfort that nonetheless couldn't quite quell the persistent knot of apprehension in his stomach. The recent incidents at the ranch had been subtle at first. A few fences cut in remote areas, a handful of cattle driven off into the vast, unforgiving wilderness, minor disruptions that could, at a stretch, be dismissed as random acts of petty mischief or the work of itinerant peeper. Outlaws. But, as the frequency increased and the disruptions grew more targeted, a watering hole deliberately fouled, a barn door mysteriously left ajar leading to a night of frantic repairs, a sinister, undeniable pattern began to emerge. Someone wanted the Grady land, and they were willing to go to unsettling lengths to acquire it. Charlotte met him at the corral, her hands already dusty from mending a broken fence post, the rhythm of her work a testament to her tireless dedication. She wore practical buckskin trousers, worn soft with age and labor, and a faded blue shirt, its sleeves rolled up to reveal strong, capable forearms crisscrossed with faint scars, the indelible marks of a rancher's towel. Life. Her dark, braided hair, usually neatly coiled at the nape of her neck, had escaped in soft, unruly strands around her face, framing eyes the color of a clear summer sky, clear and unyielding. The years had not only sculpted her form from gangly youth to graceful womanhood, but had also tempered her spirit, honing it into a quiet authority that belied her age. She moved with an easy, fluid grace that belied her physical strength, her scuffed boots kicking up tiny clouds of dust with each purposeful step. "Ethan," she greeted him, her voice a low, warm alto that always seemed to cut through the extraneous noise of the world, settling his anxious thoughts. There was no artifice in her, no delicate femininity that withered in the face of hardship. She was as elemental as the land she loved, her spirit as untamed and resilient as the wild mustangs that roamed the surrounding mesas, her roots deep in the sun-baked earth. "Another one? I take it?" He dismounted, the worn leather of his saddle creaking in protest, a familiar sound of hard-earned wear. A dozen more cattle spooked off the north pasture last night, clean cut on the barbed wire, too precise for just an animal. They knew what they were doing. He surveyed her, a familiar tremor running through him, a subtle shift in the carefully constructed composure he usually maintained. She was no longer the little sister he had awkwardly played cards with during Cole's shifts, the child he had sworn to protect from the world's harsh realities. She was a woman, formidable and captivating, and the oath he had made to Cole, that silent, binding vow of loyalty, felt increasingly brittle, stretched taut with each passing day he spent in her presence. The very air around her seemed to shimmer with an unspoken energy, a subtle magnetic pull that he found himself drawn to with an irresistible, terrifying force. "They're getting bolder," Charlotte observed, her brow furrowed in thought, her gaze scanning the distant horizon where the first stars began to prick the deepening indigo sky. Her voice held a quiet determination, not fear, a testament to her unyielding spirit. "This isn't just mischief, Ethan. Someone wants us gone. They want this land." "I know," he responded, his own voice deeper than usual, rougher with the effort of control. "That's why I'm here." He had already spoken with Cole, who was investigating similar incidents affecting other, smaller ranchers in the area. A series of seemingly isolated disturbances that were beginning to coalesce into a disturbing pattern. But the Grady Ranch, larger and more fertile than most, its strategic location vital, seemed to be the primary target, the linchpin in a larger, darker scheme. Cole had asked him to keep an eye on things, to provide an extra layer of security, knowing Ethan's quiet competence, his unwavering loyalty, and his ability to blend into the shadows. It was a role he took seriously, a debt he owed, a promise to a friend. But the insidious undercurrent of his duty was now inextricably tied to Charlotte, a secret current that threatened to pull him under, to unravel everything he thought he knew. They walked the perimeter of the north pasture, the lingering warmth of the day radiating from the dusty ground. Charlotte moved with a rancher's instinct, pointing out subtle details that would escape a less observant eye. A peculiar, heavy boot print near the freshly cut fence, deeper and more defined than any ranch hand's the way a certain patch of wild grass was trampled in an unusual pattern, too deliberate for grazing cattle. Her knowledge of the land was profound, etched into her very being through years of intimate connection. She saw things he missed, details that spoke volumes to her attuned senses, clues that whispered of human interference, of malicious intent. He admired her focus, her sharp intelligence, the meticulous way her mind worked, patiently piecing together the subtle clues left by their unseen tormentors. There was a quiet intensity about her, a focused determination, but both fascinated and unnerved him. As dusk deepened, deepening the shadows that stretched across the land, they found themselves by the old weathered barn, its timbers silvered by years of sun and rain. The familiar scent of hay and horses, mingled with the faint, sweet smell of fresh-cut timber, filled the air, a comforting aroma amidst the growing anxiety. Charlotte sighed, a soft sound that seemed to carry the weight of her responsibilities, the immense burden of protecting her family's legacy. "It's exhausting, Ethan. Always looking over your shoulder, always wondering who it is, and why they want this so badly." Her voice held a rare vulnerability, a fleeting glimpse beneath her fierce exterior, a crack in the formidable wall she presented to the world. He found himself reaching out, his hand hovering for a moment, a silent battle waging within him, before settling gently on her arm. Her skin was warm, resilient, a texture of sun-baked earth and enduring strength, and a jolt of electricity, sharp and undeniable, shot through him at the contact. He felt a tremor in his own hand, betraying the carefully constructed composure he maintained, the strict boundaries he had imposed upon himself. "We'll figure it out, Charlotte," he promised, his voice low, rough with an emotion he dared not name, a nascent protectiveness that warred with his duty. "I won't let anything happen to this ranch, or to you." His gaze met hers in the twilight, and in the deepening shadows, her eyes seemed to hold a flicker of something new, something that mirrored the unspoken longing, the dangerous recognition in his own heart. The air between them crackled with an undeniable energy, a tension that was both terrifying and exhilarating, a potent mix of fear and forbidden desire. The line he had sworn never to cross was not just blurred, it had dissolved entirely, leaving him adrift in a sea of overwhelming, unbidden desire. The scent of pine and earth, distinct from the dust and sage of the ranch, clung to him, a faint but persistent reminder of his own past, of the debt he owed. But Charlotte's presence, her quiet strength, her burgeoning vulnerability, pulled him deeper into a present he could no longer deny. The sun had set, but the heat between them lingered, a dangerous warmth in the cool evening air, a silent prelude to the storm gathering on the horizon. The serpent's shadow, the encroaching darkness, brought with it a different kind of vigil. Ethan settled into a rigorous routine of night patrols, his senses sharpened by the constant threat, his awareness tuned to every subtle rustle of leaves, every distant hoot of an owl, every whisper of the wind through the tall prairie grass. The air grew cooler as the night deepened, carrying the crisp, clean scent of juniper from the distant hills and the faint, sweet smell of wild honeysuckle that bloomed in the hidden canyons. He spent hours on horseback, a silent sentinel, riding the extensive perimeter of the Grady Ranch, his presence a living barrier against the unseen enemy. He knew the land intimately, every gully, every rise, every cluster of gnarled mesquite trees that offered perfect cover for an ambush. His past, a fragmented tapestry of shadowed memories and hard-won survival in the unforgiving mining territories before coal had found him, had inadvertently prepared him for this solitary, watchful existence, this constant state of alert. Charlotte, restless and equally determined to protect her legacy, often joined him, riding her sturdy roan mare, her form a graceful silhouette against the moonlit landscape. She moved with an innate understanding of the night, her senses as keen as any seasoned scout, her eyes discerning shapes in the gloom that Ethan still struggled to define. She rarely spoke, preferring the quiet companionship, the shared understanding that passed between them in the profound silence of the prairie night. But her presence was a constant, unsettling comfort to Ethan, a magnetic pull that resonated deep in his bones, an unbidden warmth in his chest. The scent of her wild sage, a hint of something uniquely floral, and the earthy aroma of horses and worn leather became inextricably intertwined with the very essence of the ranch, a heady, dangerous perfume that clouded his judgment and sharpened his awareness. One night, as they rode near the west pasture, a chilling sound pierced the otherwise serene silence. A mournful, drawn-out bawl from a steer, a sound of agony, followed almost immediately by the distant, muffled crack of a rifle. They spurred their horses instantly, tearing across the open land, the thundering hooves echoing the frantic beat of Ethan's heart. They found a prized bull, one of the Grady's best breeding stock, lying dead in the dewy grass, a single precise bullet wound behind its ear. The rustlers had moved swiftly, with chilling efficiency, leaving little trace beyond the trampled earth, the lingering scent of stale tobacco, and the fresh horror of their act. Charlotte dismounted, her face pale in the stark moonlight, her eyes blazing with a fierce, cold fury that was almost frightening in its intensity. "They're escalating," she whispered, her voice tight with suppressed rage, a tremor running through her. "This isn't just about driving off cattle anymore. This is personal. They're trying to break us, to break me." The sight of her raw pain, the flicker of helplessness in her eyes, ignited a protective fire within Ethan, a fierce, primal urge to defend her. He swore, silently, that he would make whoever did this pay, no matter the cost. He knelt beside the fallen bull, examining the bullet wound, meticulously noting its size and trajectory, the lack of scattered powder. "This was professional," he stated, his voice grim, rough with suppressed anger. "No amateur. They know exactly what they're doing." He scanned the ground, noting the distinct pattern of boot prints, deeper and heavier than anything he'd seen before, a specific, unfamiliar tread. "And they're not afraid to make a statement." Charlotte knelt beside him, her hand brushing his as she instinctively reached out to touch the bull's still warm, coarse hide. The contact, brief and accidental, sent a jolt through him, a jolt that was entirely separate from the grim reality of the situation, a spark of dangerous electricity. He quickly pulled his hand away, the heat of her touch lingering on his skin, a burning reminder of the forbidden boundary. The unspoken line, once dissolved, felt like it was trying to reform, a desperate, futile attempt to resurrect the boundaries he had sworn to uphold. But it was a futile effort. He was already too far gone. adrift in a sea of emotion. The next day, driven by a relentless need for answers, Ethan spent hours meticulously tracking the rustler's faint trail, an almost invisible path that led him far into the rough, broken country bordering the Grady land. He found discarded cigarette butts, a specific, unusual brand not common in Harmony Gulch, and a single, unusually carved bone button from a coat, evidence that spoke of a distinct group, not just random outlaws or opportunistic thieves. His experience as a tracker, honed during his solitary time in the unforgiving mining territories before Cole had found him, proved invaluable. The trail eventually led him to the remnants of an old, abandoned homestead, deep in a secluded, overgrown canyon, a place rumored to be a hideout for various unsavory characters, a place whispered about in hushed tones around campfires. The air here was heavy with a sense of stagnation, of forgotten lives and lingering shadows, an oppressive stillness that hinted at dark secrets. He returned to the ranch as dusk settled, finding Charlotte mending a bridle in the barn, the rhythmic creak of the worn leather a familiar, comforting sound. He shared his grim findings, describing the distinctive boot prints, the unusual cigarette butts, the unique bone button. Her eyes narrowed in thought, her mind already racing. The homestead? That's old territory. No one goes there anymore, not for decades. Someone does now, Ethan countered, his voice grim, a cold certainty in his tone. And they're getting organized. This isn't just a few men. This is a deliberate operation. He watched her, the lamplight casting a soft, golden glow on her dark, braided hair, illuminating the fierce determination in her eyes, the worry etched around their edges. The urge to reach out, to smooth the worry from her brow, to offer a physical comfort, was almost overwhelming. He clenched his hands, forcing himself to maintain a professional distance, even as his heart hammered against his ribs, a desperate drumbeat against the rising tide of his desire. Later that evening, after a sparse, tense dinner, they sat on the porch, the crickets chirping a rhythmic symphony around them, the vast, star-studded sky stretching above, a canvas of endless, indifferent possibilities. Charlotte wrapped a faded, familiar blanket around her shoulders, a chill settling in the night air, carrying the scent of pine and impending change. Cole's been investigating similar incidents around town, she mused, her voice low, reflective. Small businesses being harassed, land disputes suddenly escalating, mysterious disappearances, anonymous threats. It's like someone's trying to disrupt everything, to break the town's spirit. Ethan nodded, the scattered pieces of the puzzle slowly, terrifyingly clicking into place, forming a coherent, menacing image. It's not just your land, Charlotte. It's a pattern. Someone's trying to gain control, systematically dismantling the foundations of Harmony Gulch, choking it from within. The thought sent a cold dread through him. Cole, his brother, his protector, the very heart of law and order in Harmony Gulch, was out there, potentially facing the same unseen enemy. A sprawling, insidious network. The stakes had just risen exponentially. He glanced at Charlotte, her face illuminated by the faint glow of the stars, by the unwavering light of her spirit. She was more than just a rancher. She was a symbol of Harmony Gulch's resilience, its enduring spirit, and now an unwilling but vital part of a much larger, more dangerous conflict. His duty to protect her had never felt more profound, more intertwined with the survival of everything he held dear. The faint scent of honeysuckle drifted on the breeze, a deceptive sweetness in the face of the encroaching storm. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that their quiet vigil was about to turn into a desperate, defining fight. Whispers of the serpent, The realization that the attacks on the Grady Ranch were not isolated incidents, but rather carefully orchestrated moves in a larger, more sinister pattern, a deliberate attempt to destabilize Harmony Gulch and seize control, sent a cold dread through Ethan. It was no longer just about protecting Charlotte and her family's ancestral land. It was about safeguarding the very fabric of the community, the fragile peace that Cole had worked so tirelessly to maintain, the values of justice and hard work that defined their home. The weight of this new understanding settled heavily on his shoulders, making his every movement feel deliberate, charged with a newfound urgency. The air itself seemed to vibrate with a silent, unseen menace. He continued his patrols, now with a heightened sense of vigilance, his eyes scanning not just for trespassers, but for any subtle anomaly, any sign that their unseen enemy was tightening its insidious grip. The vast, silent nights of the prairie, once a source of quiet solitude, became a canvas for his deepening anxieties, each rustle of leaves a potential warning, each shadow a potential threat. He knew Cole was tirelessly investigating similar disturbances in town, inexplicable fires in abandoned buildings, sudden orchestrated bank runs designed to sow panic, anonymous threats against local businesses that resisted being bought out cheaply, but the true scope of the conspiracy, the insidious nature of its spread, was still terrifyingly unclear. Charlotte, equally consumed by the escalating threat to her family's legacy, spent her days organizing the ranch hands, fortifying vulnerable points, and riding out to inspect distant pastures with a grim determination. Her practical competence, her calm decisiveness even under duress, was a quiet strength, a stark contrast to the shadowy, manipulative tactics of their adversaries. She carried herself with an unyielding resolve, her jaw often set in a determined line, her gaze sharp with unwavering focus. Ethan found himself drawn to her unwavering spirit, to the fierce dedication that shone in her eyes, to the unyielding refusal to be broken. It was a dangerous admiration, one that pushed the boundaries of his sworn loyalty to Cole further with every passing day. One sweltering afternoon, as they were inspecting a particularly remote section of fence line that bordered a rocky, seldom visited canyon, they came across a series of unfamiliar markings etched deeply into the ancient, weathered bark of an old gnarled oak tree. They were crude, almost tribal symbols, resembling a coiled snake devouring a stylized sun, its rays jagged and predatory. Charlotte gasped, her hand instinctively flying to her mouth, her breath catching in her throat. That's an old symbol," she whispered, her voice strained, laced with a tremor of unsettling recognition. "From the stories, the whispering serpents." Ethan frowned, the strange, unsettling symbols stirring an unfamiliar disquiet in him. Whispering serpents? What does that mean? Is it some local gang? He had heard of many outlaw factions, but this name resonated with something ancient, something beyond mere banditry. Charlotte's eyes, usually so clear and resolute, were clouded with a sudden, deep apprehension, a fear that transcended the practical dangers they faced. "It's a legend, Ethan, a dark tale, whispered by the elders around winter fires, of a secret society. They were said to control the water and the land, to manipulate communities from the shadows, bending them to their will for power and wealth. They supposedly rose up centuries ago, claiming dominion, that they were eventually driven back by the old families, by the true settlers who valued freedom. It's just a story, a superstition, a warning for children." Her voice trailed off, but her gaze lingered on the etched symbols, a cold dread seeping into her expression, an unnerving recognition of the familiar in the face of the horrifying. The line between myth and harsh reality, for a terrifying moment, seemed to blur, dissolving into a chilling present. As they rode back to the ranch, Charlotte recounted the whispered lore in hushed tones, the legends her grandmother used to tell, of the whispering serpents who controlled essential resources, manipulating local communities for power and wealth. They spoke of a charismatic, ruthless leader who could bend others to his will through fear and false promises, and of a network of loyal, shadowy followers hidden in plain sight, their true allegiances concealed. The stories, once chilling campfire tales meant to keep young ones close to home, now felt disturbingly, undeniably real, echoing the very patterns of disruption and intimidation they were witnessing in Harmony Gulch. The scattered pieces of the puzzle, once disconnected and seemingly random, began to form a horrifying, coherent image. That evening, as the last light faded from the sky, a lone rider arrived at the Grady Ranch, a young deputy from Harmony Gulch, his face pale and grim, his horse lathered with foam. He carried an urgent message from Cole. The sheriff had, through tireless investigation and shrewd detective work, located the undeniable source of the recent troubles. A powerful, wealthy land speculator named Maxwell Thorne, new to the territory, who had been quietly buying up land and businesses on the cheap, often through insidious intimidation and veiled threats. Thorne had recently set his sights, with unwavering avarice, on the Grady Ranch, the largest and most fertile property in the entire region, a critical link in his growing network of acquisitions, a vital artery he sought to control. The deputy's next words sent a jolt of ice through Ethan's veins, chilling him to the bone. Thorne had just acquired the old, abandoned homestead in the secluded canyon, the very place Ethan had tracked the rustlers to, the place where he had found the distinctive bone button. The connection was undeniable, terrifying in its clarity. Thorne wasn't just a mere speculator, he was the charismatic, ruthless leader of the Whispering Serpents, using ancient superstitions and modern, brutal tactics to consolidate his power and establish a new, insidious dominion over Harmony Gulch. The symbols on the tree, the targeted attacks, the escalating violence, the systematic disruption of the town, it all pointed to a calculated, systematic takeover, a reemergence of an ancient darkness. The stakes had never been higher. Ethan immediately rode into town, a fierce determination hardening his resolve, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He found Cole in his office, poring over stacks of legal documents and intricate maps, his brow furrowed in deep concentration. The sheriff looked up, his eyes weary from sleepless nights, but a flicker of grim satisfaction, of certainty, in their depths. "Thorne's our man," Cole stated, his voice low, heavy with the weight of his discovery. "He's been working in the shadows, buying off officials, threatening anyone who stands in his way. He wants Harmony Gulch, pure and simple. Wants to own it, body and soul. And the Grady Ranch is the linchpin," Ethan added, his voice tight, rough with anger. He recounted Charlotte's discovery of the serpent symbols, the chilling resonance with ancient lore, the old stories suddenly made terrifyingly real. Cole's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of genuine concern passing through their usually pragmatic depths. The pragmatic sheriff, who rarely put stock in old wives' tales or superstitions, couldn't deny the unsettling, undeniable connection. "He's using the old legends to instill fear," Cole concluded, his jaw tight, his voice filled with contempt. "Making it seem like some unholy power, when it's just a common land grab, albeit a ruthless, psychopathic one." He slammed his fist on the desk, the sound echoing through the small office. "But he picked the wrong family to cross, and the wrong damn town to try and conquer." A desperate, audacious plan began to form between them, a dangerous gambit to expose Thorn's true nature and dismantle his entire network before he could consolidate his ill-gotten power. It would require careful timing, a coordinated, perfectly executed effort, and an element of complete surprise. Cole would use his authority as sheriff to gather irrefutable legal evidence of Thorn's illicit land acquisitions and threats, preparing a case that would bring him to justice in the harsh light of the law. Ethan, working in the shadows, would track Thorn's operatives, identifying their methods and disrupting their smaller operations, effectively cutting off the serpent's venomous tendrils, severing its supply lines. The aim was to force Thorn into an open, desperate move, revealing the true extent of his power and exposing his hidden followers. But as they discussed the intricate strategy, a silent, unsettling truth settled even deeper in Ethan's heart. He was fighting for Cole, for Harmony Gulch, yes. But increasingly, his deepest motivation, his most visceral, undeniable need, was to protect Charlotte. The fear of losing her, of seeing her fierce spirit broken by Thorn's machinations, was a terror that surpassed all others, a primal dread that eclipsed even his fear of betraying Cole. The air in the sheriff's office, usually filled with the mundane scent of paper and stale coffee, now carried the subtle, dangerous perfume of Charlotte's essence, a haunting, intoxicating reminder of the line he had irrevocably crossed. His loyalty to Cole was profound, a debt that could never be fully repaid. But his heart, irrevocably drawn to his sister, beat to a frantic rhythm only she could inspire, a melody of forbidden love. The dawn of reckoning. The ride back to the Grady Ranch was a grim race against time, a desperate dash against the encroaching shadow of Thorn's impending attack. The rising sun, usually a welcome harbinger of a new day, cast long, ominous shadows ahead of them, mirroring the profound foreboding that settled deep in Ethan and Charlotte's hearts. They knew Thorn's men would be on the move, poised to strike, and every minute counted. The scent of dust and fear mingled in the cool morning air, a stark, unwelcome contrast to the usual crispness of dawn. Upon their arrival, the Grady Ranch, usually a bastion of quiet industry, erupted into a whirlwind of desperate preparation. Charlotte, her voice clear and authoritative despite the strain, directed the ranch hands, transforming the peaceful homestead into a makeshift fortress. Wagons were overturned to create sturdy barricades, providing crucial cover for riflemen. Loopholes, crude but effective, were hastily cut into the thick, weathered walls of the barn and the main house. Water barrels were positioned for easy access, ammunition boxes distributed with grim efficiency. Every man, and even some of the older, more resilient women, were assigned roles, their faces grim but resolute, their eyes reflecting a fierce determination. They were fighting for their home, for their cherished way of life, against a ruthless force that threatened to extinguish it all. Ethan, meanwhile, took charge of tactical positioning, his mind a whirlwind of strategic calculations. He surveyed the land with a veteran's eye, identifying natural choke points, strategic overlooks, and potential ambush sites where Thorn's superior numbers could be bottlenecked. His experience in the mines, his quick assessment of structural weaknesses and strategic advantages, translated into a profound understanding of defensive positions. He positioned the most skilled shots in key locations, instructing them on lines of fire, fields of view, and crucial fallback positions should the initial lines be breached. He moved with a grim efficiency, his every movement economical, precise, but always, his gaze kept returning to Charlotte. She was everywhere, moving with an unyielding grace, her determination a palpable force that infused courage into everyone around her, a silent inspiration in the face of despair. The minutes stretched into an eternity, each tick of the grandfather clock in the ranch house sounding like a hammer blow. The distant rumble of hooves, at first barely perceptible, a faint tremor in the earth, grew steadily louder, swelling into a chilling, relentless drumbeat against the silence of the prairie. The dust cloud on the distant horizon, thin at first, barely a smudge against the sky, billowed into a menacing brown wall, signaling the undeniable approach of Thorne's full, overwhelming force. The air crackled with tension, thick with the scent of fear, dust, and raw adrenaline. "They're here," Charlotte murmured, her voice barely a whisper, her hand instinctively reaching for Ethan's. Her fingers intertwined with his, a silent promise of solidarity, of fleeting comfort amidst the terrifying reality of the impending storm. His thumb brushed hers, a brief, electrifying touch that grounded him even as his world threatened to explode. Thorne's men appeared over the ridge, a formidable, terrifying sight. Dozens of them, perhaps even more, heavily armed with rifles and shotguns, riding with ruthless precision, their faces hidden behind dark bandanas, their eyes glinting with malicious intent. At their head, on a magnificent black stallion, rode Maxwell Thorne himself. He cut a sinister, imposing figure, his silhouette framed against the harsh morning light, a living embodiment of the greed, corruption, and malevolence that sought to swallow Harmony Gulch whole. The crude gallows they had seen earlier were now being pulled by a team of horses, a chilling visual threat meant to break their spirit before the fight even began, a stark reminder of Thorne's ruthless intentions. A loud shout rang out from Thorne's side, a gravelly voice demanding their immediate surrender, promising swift mercy in exchange for their land and their lives. The offer was met with a defiant, collective silence from the Grady Ranch, a unified refusal that resonated with unspoken courage, an unyielding spirit that refused to bend. Then, Thorne's voice, cold and laced with chilling menace, cut through the air, amplified by the sudden, terrifying quiet. "Then you will fall, and Harmony Gulch will be mine, every last acre, every last soul." The first shots rang out, shattering the fragile peace of the morning. Rifles cracked, sending splinters flying from the hastily erected barricades. The ranch hands, though drastically outmanned, fought with a desperate primal ferocity, fueled by their deep love for their home, their families, and their unwavering loyalty to Charlotte. Ethan moved like a shadow, his revolver spitting fire, his aim precise and deadly. He picked off riders with chilling accuracy, disarmed others with swift, brutal efficiency, his movements fluid and economical, honed by years of hard-won survival. He was a force of nature, a protector honed by years of quiet observation and a lifetime of facing insurmountable odds. He heard the whistle of bullets past his ear, felt the tremor of explosions from dynamite charges Thorne's men were throwing towards the barn, intent on destroying their cover. The air filled with the acrid smell of gunpowder, the shouts of men, the desperate cries of wounded horses, a horrifying symphony of conflict. Charlotte, positioned strategically on the roof of the main house, provided crucial covering fire with her Winchester rifle, her aim as true as any seasoned marksman. She picked off attackers with a cool, deadly precision, her voice cutting through the din as she shouted precise, clear commands to the ranch hands below. She was a revelation, a fierce warrior protecting her land. And Ethan felt a surge of profound admiration, even in the midst of the chaos, a love that intensified with every crack of her rifle. His heart swelled with a fierce, possessive love that tightened his grip on his own weapon. The battle raged for what felt like an eternity, a brutal symphony of gunfire, desperate shouts, and the raw, desperate struggle for survival. Thorne's men were relentless, pushing forward with overwhelming numbers, their determination fueled by the promise of immense wealth and the gnawing fear of their ruthless leader. The ranch hands, though valiant beyond measure, were beginning to falter, their ammunition dwindling, their energy waning, their faces etched with exhaustion. Suddenly, a loud, splintering crack echoed from the main barn. A section of the roof collapsed inward with a deafening roar, sending heavy timbers crashing down, trapping some of the ranch hands beneath the debris. Thorne's men cheered, a guttural roar of triumph, pressing their advantage, advancing with renewed vigor, sensing victory. Despair, cold and insidious, began to creep into Ethan's heart, a chilling premonition of defeat. They were losing. But then, a distant sound, faint at first, then growing steadily louder, pierced through the cacophony of battle, cutting through the gunfire and the shouts. The rhythmic thundering of hooves, many hooves, a collective roar of hundreds of animals, approaching rapidly from the direction of Harmony Gulch. A collective gasp rose from Thorne's men, their relentless assault faltering, their confident charge slowing to an uncertain halt. And then, a sight that brought tears to Ethan's eyes, a surge of adrenaline through his exhausted body, a wave of profound relief. Over the ridge, silhouetted against the morning sun, rode Sheriff Grady, at the head of a formidable contingent of Harmony Gulch citizens. They were not just a few brave men. They were dozens, hundreds, armed with rifles and shotguns, wielding pickaxes and pitchforks, their faces grim with determination, their shouts of defiance echoing across the prairie. The town had risen. Cole had rallied them, united them against the common enemy. The tables turned instantly. Thorne's men, caught between two powerful, determined forces, their morale shattered by the unexpected arrival, began to break and flee in disarray. Thorne himself, his face contorted in a mask of pure, unadulterated rage and disbelief, spurred his black stallion, attempting to escape into the rugged canyons, to vanish into the broken country that had once offered him refuge. Cole, seeing him, raised his rifle, aiming with a steady, practiced hand, and fired. The shot was true, piercing the stillness of the air. Thorne's horse reared violently, and he tumbled from the saddle, landing with a sickening thud in the dust, his reign of terror finally and irrevocably over. The aftermath was a blur of exhausted relief, of helping the wounded, of rounding up the defeated and the disoriented. Cole, his face streaked with sweat, grime, and the dust of battle, rode up to the ranch house, his gaze sweeping over the damage, then settling with profound relief on Ethan and Charlotte, safe and alive. His eyes, though weary, held a profound sense of satisfaction, a quiet triumph. "You held them off," Cole said, his voice hoarse, but with a deep undercurrent of pride that warmed Ethan to the core. "You saved the ranch. You saved Harmony Gulch." He looked at Charlotte, his gaze softening, a wave of brotherly affection washing over his tired features. "You were incredible, sis. Just like always. A true Grady." Then his eyes found Ethan's, and in their depths, Ethan saw the familiar, unwavering trust, the deep bond of brotherhood, a bond that had been tested and had, against all odds, held strong. But as Cole's gaze lingered on Charlotte, then subtly shifted back to Ethan, his eyes narrowed slightly, a subtle flicker of something unreadable passing through their depths. He looked from Charlotte to Ethan, then back again, a silent, unsettling question forming in his gaze, a dawning suspicion that slowly, inexorably, began to piece together the unspoken truth. The palpable relief of victory was in the air, but a new tension, a new layer of unspoken truth, now hung in the charged space between them. The battle was won, the immediate danger averted, but the deepest, most perilous confrontation, the revelation of a forbidden love, was yet to come. The sun, now high in the sky, shone down on Harmony Gulch, illuminating not just a triumph, but the fragile precipice of a secret finally exposed. The unspoken truth, the air, still heavy with the scent of gunpowder and dust, crackled with an entirely new kind of tension as Cole's gaze lingered, sharp and discerning, on Ethan and Charlotte. The celebratory atmosphere of their hard-won victory abruptly dissipated, replaced by a profound, suffocating silence. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drum against the impending revelation. He could almost feel Cole's mind working, piecing together the subtle nuances he'd missed in the chaos of battle. Charlotte's unbidden touch, the fierce protectiveness in Ethan's eyes, the quiet intimacy that now bound them. The years of shared history, of unspoken understanding between Cole and Ethan, were now hanging precariously in the balance. Cole finally shifted his weight, his boots scuffing against the dusty ground, the sound unnaturally loud in the profound stillness. "There's something else, isn't there?" he asked, his voice low, deceptively calm, a dangerous quiet that sent a chill down Ethan's spine. He wasn't accusing, not yet. He was simply stating a dawning fact, a realization that was slowly, agonizingly, settling in, etching lines of hurt and confusion onto his usually stoic face. "Because what it looks like, what I feel, is a betrayal of everything we've built. Everything I thought I knew about you, Ethan." His gaze was fixed on Ethan, unwavering, searching for answers, for justification, for an explanation that might somehow soften the blow of this unwelcome truth. The depth of the hurt in his eyes was almost unbearable, a tangible weight that pressed down on Ethan, a bitter taste in his mouth. Charlotte, sensing the seismic shift in Cole's demeanor, stepped forward, her hand still clasped in Ethan's, her fingers tightening, a silent act of defiance and solidarity. Her presence was a comforting anchor in the suddenly tumultuous storm. "It's not a betrayal, Cole," she said, her voice soft but firm, resolute, her gaze meeting her brother's without flinching. Her eyes, though weary from battle, held a fierce clarity. "It's not what you think. It's just what it is. And it's real." Her words, simple and direct, carried an undeniable truth, a quiet power that sought to bridge the chasm opening between the two men, to soften the sharp edges of his perceived betrayal. Ethan squeezed her hand, a silent thank you for her courage, for standing by him in this impossible moment. He took a deep, fortifying breath, the scent of dust and bruised sage filling his lungs, steeling himself for the full confession. The truth, however painful, had to be spoken. "When you pulled me out of that mine, Cole," he began, his voice rough with emotion, raw with the weight of years, "you gave me back my life. You gave me a home. You gave me a family. I swore then, that day, that I'd never do anything to betray that. Anything to hurt you. Anything to jeopardize what we had." He paused, his gaze meeting Cole's, holding the painful certainty of his words. "And that included Charlotte. I saw her as your little sister, a part of the family I swore to protect, off limits, beyond consideration." He shifted his weight, his gaze dropping momentarily before rising again, meeting Cole's unwavering stare, acknowledging the enormity of his admission. "But she's not a child anymore, Cole. And this past month, fighting alongside her, seeing her strength, her courage, her fierce determination, her unwavering spirit, her heart." He swallowed, his voice cracking with the depth of his feelings, betraying the carefully constructed composure he had tried to maintain. "I couldn't help it. It wasn't a choice I made consciously. It just happened. It grew, slowly at first, then with an overwhelming force that I couldn't deny." He looked at Charlotte, a raw tenderness in his eyes, a clear, open declaration of his profound feelings, laying his heart bare for both Cole and the world to see. "I fell in love with her, Cole, and I know that complicates everything. I know it violates the unspoken rules, but I can't lie about it. Not to you, not to her, not to myself." A profound silence followed his words, a tense, breathless moment where the fate of their friendship, their brotherhood, the very foundation of Ethan's life in Harmony Gulch, hung precariously in the balance. Cole's face remained unreadable, a silent battle raging within him between the raw hurt of perceived betrayal and the undeniable truth of what he saw before him. He looked from Ethan, his best friend, the man he trusted implicitly, to Charlotte, his beloved little sister, his only immediate family, the last link to their parents, and the raw, undeniable truth of their connection, the deep affection in their eyes, was slowly, agonizingly, settling in, forcing him to confront a reality he hadn't prepared for. Finally, Cole let out a slow, deliberate breath, a sound that seemed to carry the immense weight of his internal struggle, of a world view irrevocably shifting. His gaze softened, a flicker of something akin to understanding, mingled with his pain, beginning to surface. He looked at Ethan, then at Charlotte, and a slow, painful, almost rueful smile touched the corner of his mouth. "Damn it, Ethan," he finally muttered, his voice rough. "You always did have a knack for getting into trouble, even when you're saving the whole damn town." There was a hint of the old camaraderie in his tone, a flicker of their familiar bond. He stepped forward, not with anger or aggression, but with a weary resignation, a profound acceptance of the inevitable. He put his hands on Ethan's shoulders, his grip firm, a gesture of both power and connection. "You're my brother, Ethan. That's always been true. And you saved my sister, saved my ranch, saved this town from that snake thorn. I owe you more than I can ever repay." His gaze met Ethan's, holding a depth of emotion that transcended words, a silent acknowledgement of their shared history and the complex new layer added to it. "But if you ever hurt her, I swear to God, Ethan, I'll hunt you to the ends of this earth myself, and no alliance will save you." His voice was low, a warning, yes, but also a profound declaration of trust, but transference of sacred responsibility. Ethan felt a surge of relief so immense it almost buckled his knees, a wave of profound gratitude washing over him. He gripped Cole's shoulders in return, a silent vow passing between them, a promise he intended to keep with every fiber of his being. "I won't, Cole, never. Not a single hair on her head." Cole then looked at Charlotte, a rare, tender smile gracing his lips, softening the stern lines of his face. "And you, little sister, you always knew how to pick 'em, even if you waited until they nearly died, saving your hide first." He pulled her into a fierce brotherly hug, a silent acknowledgement of her strength, her courage, and the profound happiness that, despite the circumstances, was shining in her eyes. He released her, then clapped Ethan on the back, a rough, affectionate gesture that sealed their new understanding. As the last light faded from the sky, bathing the ravaged ranch in a soft twilight glow, the three of them stood together, a new constellation of family. The air, once heavy with unspoken tension, now resonated with a fragile, hard-won peace. The battle for the Grady Ranch was over, the immediate danger averted, but the deepest, most perilous confrontation, the revelation of a forbidden love, had yielded not loss, but a profound, unshakable acceptance. The line had been crossed, the secret revealed, and in the aftermath, A new beginning had been forged, stronger and more profound than any oath. The scent of dust and sage, mingled with the faint, sweet perfume of honeysuckle from the nearby canyons, filled the night, a silent witness to a love that had defied all odds and found its rightful place in the heart of Harmony Gulch. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in his life, Ethan felt truly, unequivocally home. The mending of scars the weeks that followed the brutal confrontation with Maxwell Thorne were a period of intense, yet profoundly restorative, activity for Harmony Gulch and, most especially, for the Grady Ranch. The air, still carrying the faint, lingering scent of gunpowder and scorched earth, gradually surrendered to the earthy aroma of damp soil and newly cut timber as the community, united by their shared ordeal, began the arduous work of healing and rebuilding. The shouts of combat were replaced by the rhythmic clang of hammers, the low murmurs of tired but grateful men, and the quiet, efficient commands of Cole as he organized the final cleanup and the transportation of Thorne's defeated men to the territorial prison. The sun beat down, harsh and relentless, a stark reminder of the trials they had endured, but also a symbol of the enduring light that had prevailed. Ethan moved through the ranch with a tireless energy, his body aching but his spirit light with the weight of their victory and the profound relief of Cole's acceptance. He assisted where he could, his strength and quiet competence invaluable. He helped tend to the wounded ranch hands, carefully bandaging gashes and splinting broken bones, offering words of quiet comfort and reassurance. He worked side by side with Cole, ensuring Thorne's captured men were secured, their weapons confiscated, their network of corruption meticulously dismantled. The sight of Thorne, now stripped of his power and arrogance, lying defeated in the back of a wagon, filled Ethan with a grim, righteous satisfaction. The tangible threat was finally gone, or so they dared to believe, allowing Harmony Gulch to begin its long, slow process of recovery. Charlotte, despite her own exhaustion, moved with a similar tireless energy, her focus unwavering. She assessed the damage to the ranch, organized the supply runs for new timber and seed, comforted the distraught families, and ensured every ranch hand, every member of her extended family, was accounted for and cared for. Her face was often smudged with dirt and sweat, her hands calloused, but her eyes, though weary, shone with a quiet triumph, a deep satisfaction in seeing her home rise again from the ashes. She was a force of nature, a true leader, embodying the resilience of the land she loved, and Ethan found himself watching her with an admiration that bordered on reverence, a love that swelled with each passing moment. The undeniable bond between them, momentarily overshadowed by the chaos of battle, now pulsed with a quiet intensity, a shared understanding that transcended words, deepened by the crucible of their shared experience. Later, as the sun began its majestic descent, painting the ravaged ranch in long, golden shadows, Cole approached Ethan and Charlotte. He carried a fresh canteen, offering a drink to each of them, a gesture of shared exhaustion and rekindled camaraderie. His face was still grim, lined with the strain of leadership and battle, but the harsh tension around his eyes had softened, replaced by a profound weariness and a nascent sense of peace. He looked at the ranch, at the evidence of the battle, then at the vast, darkening sky, a silent acknowledgement of the immense cost of their victory and the immense courage it had taken. "We did it," Cole said, his voice hoarse but deep with satisfaction, a shared pride that resonated between the three of them. "Harmony Gulch is safe. The Grady Ranch is safe. Because of you two." He paused, his gaze lingering on Charlotte, then shifting to Ethan, a subtle warmth entering his eyes. The tension, the palpable emotional distance that had hung between them before Ethan's confession, had miraculously dissipated, replaced by a fragile yet profound peace. Cole's eyes, though still holding a flicker of their earlier hurt, now softened considerably as he looked from Ethan to Charlotte and back again. He took in the subtle nuances that now flowed freely between them. The way Charlotte instinctively leaned into Ethan's space, the lingering touch of their hands when they thought no one was looking, the shared intensity in their eyes, the quiet comfort they drew from each other's presence. The brother who had saved Ethan's life, the man who knew him better than anyone, was not just seeing what had been hidden in plain sight, he was beginning to truly understand and accept it. Ethan's heart, once heavy with the weight of his secret, now felt lighter than it had in years. The confession, though terrifying, had purged the lingering fear of discovery, allowing his love for Charlotte to finally breathe in the open, under the watchful yet accepting eye of Cole. He met Cole's gaze directly, his own eyes unwavering, filled with a deep gratitude. "I know what I promised you, Cole," he stated, his voice rough but clear. "And I know what this looks like, but as Charlotte said, it's just what it is." He looked at Charlotte, a raw tenderness in his eyes, a clear declaration of his feelings. "I love her, Cole, more than anything." Charlotte squeezed Ethan's hand, a silent thank you for his courage and honesty. She met her brother's gaze, her own steady and resolute. "I love him too, Cole. He's not a betrayal. He's a part of our future." Her words, simple and direct, carried an undeniable truth, a quiet power that had finally bridged the chasm between them. Cole let out a slow, deliberate breath, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of his internal struggle, now resolved. His gaze softened, a flicker of understanding, mingled with his earlier pain, finally giving way to genuine affection. He looked at Ethan, then at Charlotte, and a slow, painful, yet genuinely amused smile touched the corner of his mouth. "Damn it, Ethan," he finally muttered, the old camaraderie returning to his voice. "You always did have a knack for getting into trouble, and for getting yourself tangled up with my family." There was no malice in his tone, only a deep, weary affection. He stepped forward, not with anger, but with a weary acceptance. He put his hands on Ethan's shoulders, his grip firm, a familiar, comforting gesture of brotherhood. "You're my brother, Ethan. That's always been true. And you saved my sister, saved my ranch, saved this town from that snake thorn. I owe you more than I can ever repay. But heed my warning again." His gaze met Ethan's, holding a depth of emotion that transcended words, the silent understanding passing between them. "If you ever hurt her, I swear to God, I'll hunt you to the ends of this earth myself. Understand?" His voice was low, a potent warning, but also a profound declaration of trust, a sacred responsibility implicitly passed. Ethan felt a surge of relief so immense it almost buckled his knees. He gripped Cole's shoulders, a silent vow passing between them, a promise he intended to keep with every fiber of his being. "I won't, Cole. Never." Cole then looked at Charlotte, a rare, tender smile gracing his lips, softening the stern lines of his face. "And you, little sister, you always knew how to pick 'em. Even if you waited until they nearly died saving your hide first and making my life a living hell." He pulled her into a fierce, brotherly hug, a silent acknowledgement of her strength, her courage, and the profound happiness that, despite the circumstances, was now shining in her eyes. He released her, then clapped Ethan on the back, a rough, affectionate gesture that sealed their new understanding, a powerful affirmation of their bond. As the last light faded from the sky, bathing the ravaged ranch in a soft, twilight glow, the three of them stood together, a new constellation of family forged in the fires of conflict and tempered by honesty. The air, once heavy with unspoken tension, now resonated with a fragile, hard-won peace. The battle for the Grady Ranch was over, the immediate danger averted, but the deepest, most perilous confrontation, the revelation of a forbidden love, had yielded not loss, but a profound, unshakable acceptance. The line had been crossed, the secret revealed, and in the aftermath, a new beginning had been forged, stronger and more profound than any oath. The scent of dust and sage, mingled with the faint, sweet perfume of honeysuckle from the nearby canyons, filled the night, a silent witness to a love that had defied all odds and found its rightful place in the heart of Harmony Gulch. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in his life, Ethan felt truly, unequivocally home. A new horizon the seasons turned, painting the vast Wyoming landscape in new hues. And with each passing month, Harmony Gulch and the Grady Ranch blossomed into a beacon of stability and renewed prosperity. The scars of the battle with Thorn, while visible, were slowly fading, becoming quiet reminders of the strength forged in adversity rather than symbols of lingering pain. Ethan and Charlotte's openly acknowledged relationship became a quiet legend, their unique blend of practical ranching prowess and quiet strength, a model for others. Their love story woven into the very fabric of the dairy fabric o' town's resilience. The ranch expanded, new structures rising with sturdy timber and stone, reflecting the growing prosperity and careful planning. Ethan, now fully a part of the Grady family, embraced his role with an unwavering dedication. His quiet competence became a cornerstone of the ranch's operations. He continued to ride the perimeters, not as a solitary sentinel against an immediate threat, but as a watchful guardian, his senses attuned to the subtle rhythms of the land. He understood that while Thorn was gone, the world was vast, and threats could emerge from unforeseen corners. He taught the ranch hands advanced tracking techniques, how to read the whispers of the wind, and how to understand the subtle shifts in the behavior of wildlife, all skills honed in his solitary past, but now shared for the common good. His past, once a fragmented tapestry of shadowed memories, was now openly discussed with Charlotte, the pieces gradually fitting together, illuminated by her unwavering acceptance and understanding. Charlotte, with her innate connection to the land and a burgeoning understanding of its deeper spiritual energies, continued to deepen her profound gifts. Her intuitive understanding of cycles, growth, and the subtle balances of nature allowed her to almost feel the health of the land. She initiated new sustainable ranching practices, ensuring the long-term vitality of their pastures and water sources, lessons learned from the very attempt to exploit their land. She worked closely with the elder women of the ranch, who had passed down generations of knowledge about herbs and the land, documenting their practices and developing curricula for the young, ensuring that their ancestral wisdom would be passed down securely through generations. Her presence, a quiet force of nature, brought a calm, nurturing energy to the entire ranch. Cole, meanwhile, fully immersed himself in rebuilding the civic trust and order of Harmony Gulch. He tirelessly pursued Thorn's remaining conspirators, ensuring they faced justice, and worked with the mayor to establish fairer land and business practices, preventing future exploitation. He fostered community gatherings, encouraging cooperation between ranchers and townspeople, slowly stitching back the fabric of trust that Thorn had attempted to unravel. His presence, a steadfast beacon of justice and order, helped to restore faith in their community and in the rule of law. His initial wariness of Ethan and Charlotte's relationship had softened into a genuine, heartfelt acceptance. He saw the genuine affection in Ethan's eyes, the quiet strength that Charlotte drew from his presence. The brotherhood between Cole and Ethan, once tested by the revelation of their love, emerged stronger, redefined by honesty and shared understanding. They remained best friends, bound by gratitude and mutual respect, their bond now encompassing a profound love for the same remarkable woman. Their own bond, the mate bond that had been forged in such profound tragedy and tested by difficult truths, now resonated with a deeper, more profound comfort. It was a silent, powerful resonance that flowed between them, a constant source of strength, understanding, and quiet joy. Their touches were infused with decades of shared experience, their gazes holding unspoken volumes of affection and trust. They cherished their moments of solitude, walking through the ancient forests, their steps synchronized, their minds intertwined in a timeless communion. In those moments, the weight of their duties dissolved, replaced by the simple, profound joy of their shared existence. One crisp autumn night, as the first flakes of snow began to fall, dusting the forest in a pristine white, Ethan and Charlotte stood on the highest peak of their territory, the Grady Ranch house glowing warmly below them, a beacon of home and hearth. The unified sounds of their thriving community rose to meet them, a powerful chorus of contentment and belonging. "Look at them, Ethan," Charlotte whispered, her voice filled with a profound tenderness. "A testament to what we built." Her hand found his, intertwining their fingers. Ethan squeezed her hand, pulling her closer, the warmth of his body a comforting presence against the gathering chill. His gaze, usually sharp with strategic focus, was soft as he surveyed their vast, prosperous lands, a silent canvas of their shared effort. "Every laugh," he murmured, his voice husky with emotion. "It's all because of the truth, because we faced it, no matter how hard, no matter the cost." He turned to her, his eyes filled with a love that spanned years of shared challenges and triumphs, a love that promised an infinite future. He gently cupped her face, his thumb tracing the soft curve of her cheek. "Our story, Charlotte," he said, his voice raw with tenderness. "It's not just our own, it's the ranch's story. It's a legend of what unity and stubborn love can achieve." Charlotte leaned into his touch, her heart overflowing. "And it began with a choice," she said, her voice soft, "to forgive the unforgivable, to embrace the undeniable, and to seek truth above all else, to find hope even in the ashes." Their lips met under the silent snowfall, a kiss of profound peace, of enduring love, and of a shared destiny that had defied all odds. The man who had once been the sheriff's best friend, bound by a vow he thought unbreakable, had crossed the line. He had fallen for his sister, and in doing so had found not betrayal, but the truest, most profound love of his life. The intricate tapestry of their lives, woven with threads of truth, betrayal, sacrifice, and an unbreakable bond, continued to unfold, adding new layers of joy and shared experience. The Grady Ranch, a beacon of resilience and unity, stood ready for whatever the future might hold, its strength flowing from the very heart of its leaders. Two souls intertwined, forever bound by love, truth, and the far. Enduring spirit of their kind. The ancient wind whispered through the snow-laden pines, carrying their story into the vastness of time. A legend born of sorrow and transformed by an extraordinary, eternal love, a testament to the power of unity and the unyielding hope that blossomed even in the darkest of times. Their legacy was not just survival, but the thriving, vibrant future they had meticulously forged together. A future stretching out, bright and limitless, beneath the vast Wyoming sky. The shadow of progress the decade that followed Thorne's defeat had solidified Harmony Gulch as a beacon of hard-won peace and prosperity. The scars on the Grady Ranch, once stark and raw, were now softened by verdant new growth, sturdy repairs, and the vibrant hum of life. Ethan and Charlotte's love story, once a hushed secret, was now a celebrated cornerstone of the community, a testament to resilience and the surprising paths of the heart. Their children, a spirited daughter named Sarah, with Charlotte's fierce eyes, and an observant son named Caleb, quiet like Ethan, were growing tall and strong, their laughter echoing across the rolling pastures. Harmony Gulch thrived under Sheriff Grady's steady hand, its newfound unity a formidable shield. But peace, even in the vast expanse of the Wyoming Territory, was rarely absolute. The whispers that began filtering into Harmony Gulch weren't of outlaws or land grabbers, but of something far more insidious to the independent spirit of the West, the relentless march of progress. Rumors of a railroad pushing westward, gobbling up land and transforming sleepy towns into bustling, often chaotic hubs, began to circulate. For some, it was a dream of prosperity, faster travel, and connection to the burgeoning cities of the East. For others, particularly the ranchers and the Native American tribes whose ancestral lands were now being bisected, it was a profound threat to their way of life, a violation of the quiet rhythms of the land. The first tangible sign arrived in the form of a surveying crew, well-dressed men with precise instruments and even more precise contracts, escorted by stern-faced private security. They camped just outside Harmony Gulch, their presence a jarring intrusion on the familiar landscape. Their leader, a Mr. Alistair Finch, was a man of polished manners, but with eyes as cold and calculating as thorns. Though his weapons were legal documents and the promise of modernization, Finch spoke eloquently of progress, of bringing the world to Harmony Gulch's doorstep, of elevating it beyond a mere frontier town. He proposed a main line of the Transcontinental Railroad to run directly through the valley, inevitably bisecting prime ranch land, including a significant portion of the Grady Ranch. Charlotte felt an immediate, visceral repulsion. The land, to her, was sacred, a living entity that nurtured and sustained them. To tear it apart with iron tracks, to deafen it with the roar of steam engines, felt like a desecration. She saw the potential for ruin, the disruption of grazing lands, the fouling of water sources, the influx of transient workers, and the inevitable clash of cultures that would follow. Her intuition, honed by years of living in harmony with the land, screamed a warning. Ethan, though more pragmatic, shared her apprehension. He understood the lure of progress, but he also recognized the immense power dynamic at play. Finch represented a force far greater than any individual outlaw. The railroad companies had the backing of distant governments and immense capital, capable of crushing resistance with legal might and economic pressure. He saw the subtle manipulation beneath Finch's smooth words, the promise of prosperity veiling an underlying demand for submission. He also knew that the railroad, if unchecked, would inevitably push their Native American neighbors, the peaceful Lakota band who often traded with Harmony Gulch, off their ancestral hunting grounds, further escalating tensions. Cole, ever the man of law and order, was caught in a precarious position. He saw the potential economic benefits for Harmony Gulch: new markets for cattle, easier access to supplies, growth for local businesses. But he also recognized the profound disruption it would cause, the inevitable conflicts over land rights, and the potential for a new kind of lawlessness. He was bound by territorial law, which largely favored the railroad, But his loyalty was to his community, to the people he had sworn to protect. He began studying railroad charters and land deeds, trying to find a legal leverage point, a way to protect his town from being swallowed whole by the inexorable push of progress. The initial meetings in the town hall were tense. Finch, with his polished speeches, painted a dazzling vision of the future. He offered generous, though often inadequate, compensation for land, and threatened legal action for those who refused. Some townsfolk, particularly the ambitious merchants, were swayed by the promise of wealth. Others, the old ranchers and farmers, felt a deep-seated fear and resistance. The town became divided, a slow, insidious rift forming where unity had once prevailed. Charlotte, with Ethan steadfastly by her side, became the most vocal opponent. She spoke passionately of the land's intrinsic value, of the ranchers' covenant with the earth, of the disruption to their way of life. Her words, usually so calm, now carried a fiery conviction that resonated deeply with those who felt the same unspoken dread. She argued that the proposed route would destroy vital watering holes and cut off traditional grazing paths, effectively crippling the ranching economy and forcing families off their land. Ethan, meanwhile, used his knowledge of the terrain to meticulously map out alternative routes, demonstrating how the railroad could bypass the most crucial ranching areas and avoid infringing upon sacred tribal lands, thereby minimizing the negative impact on Harmony Gulch. Finch, however, dismissed their proposals with a dismissive wave of his hand, citing engineering impossibilities and financial inefficiencies. One evening, as dusk settled over the Grady Ranch, bathing it in a warm golden glow, Charlotte and Ethan sat on their porch, watching their children play in the yard. Sarah, with her boisterous energy, mimicked Charlotte's ranching calls, while Caleb, quieter, was sketching the forms of horses in the dirt. The innocence of their play was a stark contrast to the growing unease. "He's like Thorn, Ethan," Charlotte said, her voice low, a tremor of frustration in it. "But with a smile and a contract instead of a gun. He's trying to break us, piece by piece, just differently." She picked up a smooth river stone, turning it over and over in her hand, a familiar habit when she was deep in thought. "My gut tells me this isn't just about efficiency. There's something else, something hidden, behind his insistence on this route." Ethan nodded, his gaze distant, analytical. "Thorn understood power, Charlotte. Finch understands it too. He knows that if they control the land the railroad runs through, they control the future of the entire valley. And if they can divide us, they win." He leaned back, the creak of the porch swing echoing in the quiet evening. "We need to understand why this specific route. There has to be a reason, beyond the obvious." His mind, ever the strategist, began to probe for the unseen motive, the hidden agenda that fueled Finch's unwavering insistence. He felt the familiar thrill of the hunt, but this time the prey was not a man with a gun, but a corporation with limitless resources. This was a battle of wits, of strategy, and of preserving a way of life. The whispers of the wind, once just the sound of the prairie, now carried the faint, unsettling hiss of progress. The unseen load Ethan's intuition, honed by years of surviving on instinct, proved unsettlingly accurate. Finch's unwavering insistence on the precise route through Harmony Gulch, particularly the portion cutting across the Grady Ranch's remote western section and then into the untouched canyons, began to gnaw at him. It wasn't just about land acquisition. There was a peculiar zeal in Finch's arguments that transcended mere corporate efficiency. The proposed route, while seemingly direct, involved significant engineering challenges through rugged terrain that would logically add to costs, not reduce them. This dissonance, This subtle irregularity in Finch's carefully constructed narrative sparked a deeper suspicion in Ethan. He began his own quiet investigation, a silent, meticulous pursuit that leveraged his unparalleled tracking skills and his deep knowledge of the land. He spent days riding the remote parts of the proposed railroad corridor, not looking for tracks or cut fences, but for subtle anomalies. Unusual geological formations, the telltale shimmer of mineral deposits in stream beds, the way certain plants grew in patterns indicative of unique soil compositions. He spoke with old prospectors who frequented the fringes of Harmony Gulch, exchanging tobacco and quiet conversation, listening to their rambling tales of forgotten claims and whispered rumors of hidden wealth in the Gerbera. Untamed wilderness. He visited the library in the nearest larger town, poring over old geological survey maps, some dating back decades, their faded lines hinting at unexplored potential. Charlotte, meanwhile, sensed his deepening focus. Her intuitive connection to the land resonated with his unspoken quest. She noticed his distant gaze, the subtle shifts in his demeanor, the way he would sometimes trace lines on the dusty ground with his boot, lost in thought. She offered her own knowledge of the local geology, passed down through generations of Gradys who had lived and worked every acre of their land. She recounted stories of glittering stones found by her ancestors, of peculiar rock formations rumored to hold secrets. Her insights, though not scientific, were deeply rooted in observation and instinct, and they provided Ethan with invaluable clues. One blustery afternoon, after days of exhaustive searching, Ethan stumbled upon it. Tucked away in a secluded, overgrown gully, a mere stone's throw from the exact path Finch had so adamantly pushed for, he found a network of old, partially collapsed mine shafts, barely visible beneath years of caw, accumulated debris, and dense scrub. They weren't just abandoned. They seemed to have been deliberately concealed, their entrances obscured by cleverly placed boulders and overgrown brush. This wasn't a casual prospector's dig. This was a systematic, albeit long-forgotten, operation. His heart quickened. He dismounted, the wind whipping at his coat, and carefully approached the largest shaft. The air emanating from its depths was cool and damp, carrying the faint, unmistakable scent of minerals. He lit a match, its flickering flame casting dancing shadows on the rough-hewn timbers. What he saw sent a jolt through him, a jolt of chilling recognition that transcended his years in the mines. The rock face, though partially obscured by decay, glinted with unmistakable veins of gold. Not just traces, but a significant, rich lode, shimmering just beneath the surface. This was it. This was Finch's hidden agenda. The railroad wasn't just about connection, it was about extraction. The proposed route was merely a pretense, a convenient way to access and transport the immense mineral wealth buried deep beneath the Grady Ranch, wealth that Thorne himself, in his crude pursuit of land, had likely overlooked. Finch wasn't a land speculator, he was a mining baron in disguise, using the facade of progress to mask a colossal land grab, a methodical plundering of the earth itself. The discovery was exhilarating, but also deeply unsettling. This wasn't merely about protecting their ranch anymore. It was about protecting a hidden fortune, a truth that could either save Harmony Gulch or destroy it entirely. He returned to the ranch as dusk settled, the last rays of sunlight painting the sky in fiery hues. He found Charlotte in the barn, currying one of the horses, her movements rhythmic and soothing. The moment he saw her, the words tumbled out, breathless, urgent. "Charlotte, I found it. Thorne wasn't just after the land. Finch isn't just after the railroad. There's gold, a huge lode, buried right where they want to run the tracks." Charlotte dropped her brush, her eyes widening, reflecting the flickering lamplight. Her face paled, then hardened with a fierce resolve. Gold? Here? My grandfather used to tell stories of a golden whisper in the mountains, but we always thought it was just legend. Her mind, quick and incisive, immediately grasped the implications. This is why he's so set on this route. It's not about convenience. It's about greed. Unlimited greed. They immediately sought out Cole. They found him in his office, immersed in legal documents, his brow furrowed with frustration. He looked up, his weariness momentarily forgotten, as he saw the grim determination on their faces. Ethan laid out his discovery, describing the concealed shafts, the glittering veins of gold, the strategic proximity to Finch's proposed route. Charlotte added the family lore, the golden whisper, lending credence to Ethan's startling claim. Cole listened, his eyes widening with each word, his initial skepticism giving way to a cold, hard realization. Gold lode, he breathed, the words heavy with implication. That explains everything. His stubbornness, his disregard for our protests, his refusal to even consider alternatives. He's not just building a railroad, he's building an empire on our land. He slammed his fist on the desk, the sound echoing through the quiet office. He wants to strip this land bare, then abandon us, leaving a scarred wasteland behind. The revelation shifted the entire battle. It wasn't just about preventing the railroad from coming through, it was about exposing Finch's true intentions, revealing him as a ruthless opportunist, not a harbinger of progress. Cole, now armed with a powerful new weapon, saw a path forward. Legal documents could be challenged, land claims revisited, and public opinion swayed if they could prove Finch was operating under false pretenses, using the railroad as a front for a colossal mining operation. The very thing Finch thought would guarantee his victory, the immense value of the gold, could be their downfall. The challenge, however, remained immense. Finch wielded power, influence, and seemingly endless resources. Proving his deception, especially when hidden behind layers of corporate charters and land deeds, would require meticulous evidence, courage, and perfect timing. They needed irrefutable proof that the railroad was merely a disguise for a mining venture, proof that would stand up in a territorial court. As they planned, a profound determination settled in Ethan's heart. He was no longer just protecting Harmony Gulch from a common criminal or a corporate bully. He was protecting it from a different kind of plunder, a violation of the very essence of the land that Charlotte loved, the land that sustained them. The fight was no longer just for survival. It was for the soul of Harmony Gulch, for the integrity of their home. The wind outside whispered through the town, but now, beneath its familiar sound, Ethan heard the faint, insidious hiss of ambition, the seductive allure of gold that threatened to consume everything. This was not merely a legal battle. It was a desperate struggle for truth, for the preservation of a way of life against the relentless, unforgiving tide of unchecked greed. The unmasking the discovery of the gold lode galvanized their resolve, transforming a defensive stance into a strategic offensive. The fight was no longer about simply rerouting the railroad, it was about unmasking Alistair Finch and exposing his true, avaricious intentions. The stakes had never been higher, nor the enemy more formidable, for Finch commanded not just raw force, but the cunning of legal machinations and the insidious power of reputation. Their plan was intricate and fraught with peril. Cole, leveraging his authority as sheriff, began meticulously gathering evidence of Finch's deceptive practices. He sent trusted deputies to scour land registries in distant towns, seeking discrepancies in property acquisitions and tracing the opaque financial trails of Finch's shell corporations. He interviewed disgruntled former employees of Finch's previous ventures, often finding them terrified into silence, but occasionally coaxing out whispers of past ruthless dealings and thinly veiled threats. The goal was to build an irrefutable legal case that would prove the railroad's proposed route was a calculated front for a mining operation. Charlotte, meanwhile, took on the vital task of uniting the disparate factions within Harmony Gulch. She organized covert meetings with the wary Native American tribes, explaining Finch's deception, emphasizing the shared threat to their lands and way of life. She spoke not of legalities, but of the spirit of the land, of the insidious poison of unchecked greed. Her impassioned words, coupled with Ethan's quiet corroboration of the physical evidence, slowly began to bridge the deep-seated distrust between ranchers and tribes, finding common ground in their shared love for the land and their mutual enemy. She also met privately with the skeptical merchants and landowners in Harmony Gulch, patiently explaining the long-term devastation Finch's mining operations would wreak, arguing that a boom built on plunder would inevitably lead to bust, leaving their town a desolate husk. She presented Ethan's geological findings in an accessible way, making the threat tangible. Ethan's role was perhaps the most dangerous and solitary. He had to gather concrete, undeniable proof of Finch's mining operations at the concealed lode. This meant infiltrating the old mine shafts, mapping the gold veins, and, crucially, finding any documents or tools that linked Finch directly to the clandestine mining preparations. He spent days, then weeks, in the treacherous canyons, moving like a ghost, his senses heightened, his every step deliberate. He learned to navigate the crumbling shafts by feel, the air heavy with dust and the chill of the earth, the eerie silence broken only by the drip of subterranean water. He found mining tools, newly purchased and conspicuously absent from any public records, bearing discrete company markings that pointed back to Finch's network. He carefully sketched the layout of the rich veins, collecting rock samples that gleamed with undeniable proof of gold. He felt the cold, hard weight of the ore in his hand, a tangible representation of the greed that threatened to consume their home. The risk of discovery was immense. Finch had his own security, rough men who patrolled the perimeter of the supposed surveying camp, their eyes sharp for intruders. Ethan had several near misses, once finding himself flattened against a rock face as a patrol passed within feet, his heart hammering like a drum against his ribs. The tension was constant, a coiled spring in his gut. During this intense period, Charlotte and Ethan's personal bond deepened even further. Their stolen moments together, brief and precious, were filled with a shared understanding, a quiet comfort that transcended the danger. They discussed strategies, whispered hopes, and confided fears, their hands often finding each other, a silent anchor in the turbulent storm. Charlotte's intuitive senses often warned Ethan of subtle shifts in the patrols, a faint tingling on her skin, a whisper in the wind that allowed him to evade capture. He, in turn, found himself more open with her than ever before, confiding the deep-seated anxieties that lurked beneath his stoic exterior. He shared memories of the mine collapse, the suffocating darkness, the primal fear of being trapped. She listened, her presence a soothing balm, her unwavering belief in him a potent antidote to his lingering self-doubt. As Cole assembled his legal dossier, he realized they needed a final, undeniable piece of leverage. The territorial government, influenced by powerful railroad lobbyists, was unlikely to act on mere circumstantial evidence. They needed a public revelation, a moment that would expose Finch's deception so thoroughly that he couldn't possibly recover. The opportunity came with the impending territorial land council meeting in a larger, central town, where Finch was scheduled to present his finalized plans for the Harmony Gulch Railroad route, expecting it to be a mere formality. Cole proposed a daring plan. They would present their evidence, collectively, at this very public forum, catching Finch completely off guard. The week before the meeting was a whirlwind of frantic preparation. Cole compiled his meticulous legal arguments, backed by witness statements and financial records. Charlotte rallied representatives from the local ranchers and, most importantly, the Native American tribes, who had agreed to speak of the sacredness of their land and the deception they had witnessed. Ethan, using his sketches and rock samples, prepared a clear, compelling presentation of the hidden gold lode, a visual testament to Finch's true intentions. The future of Harmony Gulch hinged on this single, audacious act. The journey to the territorial capital was tense. They traveled separately, a small, carefully chosen group, each carrying a piece of the puzzle. Ethan rode ahead, scouting the trail, his senses on high alert. Charlotte rode with the tribal elders, her presence a silent promise of solidarity. Cole, his face grim with determination, brought up the rear, his legal documents secured in a locked saddlebag. Upon their arrival, the territorial capital bustled with a different kind of energy. Crowded streets, grand buildings, and the air thick with political maneuvering. Finch's presence was palpable, his influence seemingly reaching every corner. He moved through the halls of power with an air of unassailable confidence, greeting officials with practiced smiles, completely unaware of the trap being laid for him. The day of the council meeting dawned crisp and clear. The council chambers were packed, a mix of curious onlookers, railroad officials, local politicians, and a few weary ranchers and stoic tribal representatives from Harmony Gulch. Finch, radiating confidence, began his presentation, his voice smooth and persuasive, painting a glorious picture of progress and prosperity. He spoke of the railroad as a unifying force, a modern marvel that would lift Harmony Gulch into the future. Then, Cole stood. His voice, usually calm and authoritative, now resonated with a quiet, powerful defiance. He began to dismantle Finch's narrative piece by piece, presenting the financial discrepancies, the coerced land sales, the threats. The room stirred, murmurs rippling through the crowd. Next, Charlotte rose. Her presence commanded immediate attention, her voice, though soft at first, growing with an undeniable power as she spoke not of legalities, but of the land itself. She spoke of its living spirit, of the sacred trust between man and earth, of the devastation that Finch's true intentions would wreak. She spoke of the fragile peace built between the ranchers and the tribes, now threatened by outside greed. The tribal elders then rose, their weathered faces etched with dignity, their voices strong as they spoke of ancient treaties and the deep spiritual connection to the land that had been violated. Their collective testimony, stark and powerful, brought a palpable tension to the room. Finally, Ethan stepped forward, carrying his sketches and a canvas bag containing the gleaming rock samples. The room fell silent as he laid out his evidence, meticulously explaining his findings, pointing to the veins of gold, the deliberately concealed mine shafts. He spoke of Finch's proposed route being a mere smokescreen, a deceitful path to plunder. He produced the illicit mining tools, linking them directly to Finch's hidden ventures. The raw, undeniable evidence was laid bare for all to see. He presented the gold-flecked rocks, passing them among the council members, their weight and shimmer undeniable proof. Finch's composure shattered. His face, usually so composed, contorted with rage and disbelief. He jumped to his feet, shouting accusations, attempting to dismiss the evidence as lies and fabrications. But it was too late. The collective weight of Cole's legal proofs, Charlotte's impassioned plea, the tribal elders' testimony, and Ethan's irrefutable physical evidence had created an undeniable truth. The whispers of the gold lode, once a secret, were now a roaring, undeniable declaration. The council members, initially swayed by Finch's promises, were now shocked, their faces a mix of anger and dismay. The public gallery erupted in a mixture of gasps and outraged shouts. Finch's carefully constructed empire crumbled before their eyes. The territorial authorities, facing undeniable proof of fraud and attempted corporate plunder, immediately ordered an investigation into Finch's activities and a halt to all railroad expansion plans through Harmony Gulch until the matter was fully resolved. The future of Harmony Gulch, once threatened by progress and greed, now shimmered with the promise of true, independent prosperity. The unmasking was complete, and the balance of power had shifted, not with violence, but with the quiet, relentless pursuit of truth. The sun, now high in the capital sky, illuminated not just their victory, but the profound strength of a community that had refused to be silenced. Their voices, once whispers, now a resounding roar. Seeds of the future, the unmasking of Alistair Finch in the Territorial Land Council chambers was a watershed moment for Harmony Gulch. The news, carried by breathless riders and amplified by the telegraph, spread like wildfire across the territory. Finch, his reputation shattered, faced a barrage of lawsuits and investigations that quickly unearthed a web of deceit, bribery, and ruthless manipulation far grander than even Cole had initially suspected. The railroad company, eager to distance itself from the scandal, publicly disavowed Finch and his predatory practices, though the incident left a lingering distrust of large corporations in the hearts of many Harmony Gulch citizens. The immediate threat of the railroad bisecting their lands was averted, and with it, the pervasive sense of unease that had settled over their valley. Back in Harmony Gulch, the victory was celebrated with a fervent, communal joy that surpassed even the relief of Thorne's defeat. It was a victory won not with guns, but with unity, intelligence, and unwavering determination. The alliance forged between the ranchers, the townspeople, and the local Native American tribes had solidified into a profound, respectful partnership. The shared experience of fighting against a common, insidious enemy had cemented bonds that transcended cultural differences, creating a true sense of a unified community. The discovered gold lode, now officially recognized as belonging to the Grady family, presented a new, complex challenge. It was immense, far richer than any prospector had dreamed, enough to transform Harmony Gulch into a bustling mining town overnight. The allure of such wealth was undeniable, but so too were the potential pitfalls. The inevitable influx of transient miners, the boom and bust cycle, the environmental devastation, and the potential loss of their raw and pastoral way of life. Charlotte and Ethan grappled with this profound decision. They spent long nights discussing the implications, their voices low, their hands intertwined. Charlotte, with her deep spiritual connection to the land, felt a profound responsibility. "This land isn't just ours, Ethan," she murmured one evening, tracing patterns on his calloused hand. "It's Harmony Gulch. It's what sustains us. If we just dig it all out, what will be left?" Her vision for the ranch, for Harmony Gulch, was one of sustainable growth, of harmony with nature, not of unchecked extraction. Ethan, ever pragmatic, understood the temptation of immediate wealth, but he also saw the chaos that could follow. The potential for greed to corrupt the very community they had fought so hard to build. His own past in the mines, the desolate landscapes left behind, the fleeting fortunes and broken lives. weighed heavily on him. He remembered the dangers, the harshness, and the fleeting nature of such wealth. "We don't need to strip it there, Charlotte," he agreed, his gaze distant, considering the vastness of the opportunity. "There's a way to use this, to secure our future, without destroying everything we cherish. A way to control it." They decided on a revolutionary approach for their time: managed, ethical mining. They would extract the gold, but at a controlled pace, investing the profits back into the community, diversifying Harmony Gulch's economy, and ensuring environmental protection. They hired trusted, local prospectors, overseen by Ethan, to manage the operation, ensuring fair wages and safe working conditions. They established a community fund, funded by a percentage of the gold profits, dedicated to building schools, improving infrastructure, and supporting struggling families. A portion of the profits would also be set aside for environmental restoration, ensuring that the land, once mined, would be carefully reclaimed and revegetated. This decision, born of their shared values and their unwavering commitment to Harmony Gulch, further solidified their standing as progressive, visionary leaders. It garnered respect not just from their own community, but from afar, as news of their unique approach to wealth management spread. Cole, as sheriff, played a crucial role in ensuring the integrity of the mining operations and protecting the community from any opportunistic elements drawn by the promise of gold. He oversaw the establishment of a robust but fair legal framework for the mine, working closely with Ethan to create regulations that prioritized safety and community well-being over pure profit. His unwavering commitment to justice ensured that the new prosperity would benefit all, not just a select few. He personally oversaw the security of the mine, establishing patrols that discouraged rampant claim jumping and kept the peace among the growing, yet still manageable mining workforce. The children, Sarah and Caleb, grew up in a world profoundly shaped by their parents' choices. They saw firsthand the power of community, the importance of balance, and the responsibility that came with leadership. Sarah, spirited and curious, spent hours at the mine, watching Ethan, asking endless questions about geology and engineering. Caleb, thoughtful and observant, often accompanied Charlotte on her walks through the thriving pastures, learning to read the subtle signs of the land, absorbing her intuitive understanding of its rhythms. They were being raised not just as the next generation of Gradys, but as the future stewards of Harmony Gulch, instilled with a deep sense of purpose and connection. The ranch itself diversified. With the influx of carefully managed gold profits, they invested in superior breeding stock, experimented with new crops suited to the semi-arid climate, and even started a small artisan craft industry, utilizing local materials. Harmony Gulch, once a modest frontier town, slowly transformed into a prosperous, self-sufficient community, a model of sustainable development in the Wild West. The annual blessing of the land ceremony grew, becoming a major regional event, a vibrant celebration of unity, tradition, and shared prosperity, attended by people from across the territory, including many Native American families whose traditional lands bordered the valley. One spring afternoon, years later, as the valley bloomed with wildflowers and the distant sound of controlled blasting from the mine was barely a whisper, Ethan and Charlotte stood on the ridge overlooking their bustling ranch. The air was sweet with the scent of blossoming sage and distant pine. Below them, children, including Sarah and Caleb, played near the creek, their laughter carrying on the gentle breeze. The mine, carefully tucked away, showed minimal impact on the surrounding landscape, a testament to their commitment to ethical practices. "We did well, didn't we?" Charlotte mused, her voice soft with contentment, her hand finding Ethan's. Her eyes, filled with a peaceful wisdom, surveyed the thriving scene below. Ethan squeezed her hand, his gaze sweeping across the prosperous valley, his heart swelling with a quiet, profound pride. "We fought for it, Charlotte, every step of the way." He looked at her, his eyes reflecting the depth of his enduring love. "We chose the harder path, but it was the right one." Their lips met under the vast, silent sky, a kiss of profound peace, of enduring love, and of a shared destiny that had defied all odds. The man who had once been the sheriff's best friend, bound by a vow he thought unbreakable, had crossed the line. He had fallen for his sister, and in doing so, had found not betrayal, but the truest, most profound love of his life. The intricate tapestry of their lives, woven with threads of truth, betrayal, sacrifice, and an unbreakable bond, continued to unfold, adding new layers of joy, shared experience, and the quiet beauty of a family. Truly home. The Grady Ranch, a beacon of resilience and unity, stood strong, its future secured, its strength flowing from the very heart of its leaders, two souls intertwined, forever bound by love, truth, and the enduring spirit of their kind. The ancient wind whispered through the pines, carrying their story into the vastness of time, a legend born of sorrow and transformed by an extraordinary, eternal love, a testament to the power of unity and the unyielding hope that blossomed even in the darkest of times. Their legacy was not just survival, but the thriving, vibrant future they had meticulously forged together, a legacy etched into the very heart of Harmony Gulch,